Hey,
You should actually
like
finish the
I.
introduction first.
Oh yeah, they don't know who we are anymore.
They don't know who we are, except that it does say it on
You're
the
interrupting
screen that
yourself,
I am
but we got to
Michelle.
tell them. Yeah.
I am Michelle. I am your co-host. And together with my partner Anne-Marie, we are having conversations with Roy. Are you Southern, Roy?
Is he
Yes.
I was
Southern?
going to
Have
say
you
our
ever
Southern
listened to him?
friend from the US, about different folks being us and him, even though Anne-Marie is also from the South. Anyway,
Yes. But we
we've
are
been
all different. We're different folks, each of us.
exactly, and mainly now we've been living the digital nomad lifestyle, and Roy is not, and he cannot fathom how we do it. So he's quite curious to know about that.
So
Yes.
that's what we're going to talk about.
That's what we'll talk
And
about.
we decided let's just make a whole podcast about
What is life as a digital nomad?
it. Yeah. Mainly, this is just because Courtney said, my wife, look, 2023, you got to stop interrupting me so much. And so I knew I had to find another outlet for interrupting people. So today, while I will not share with you what I will be interrupting you with, since that is a surprise, I will share with you what I will be interrupting, which is your answer to my question: what is a digital nomad in the first place? I've seen Lawrence of Arabia, but I feel like that didn't capture the whole picture.
Well, I mean, as much as the movie was digital, that's about the only digital part of the nomad stuff in there. I would
Yeah.
say a digital nomad is someone that has a nomadic lifestyle and works in the digital world. I guess I don't know if that's the official
So
description for it.
profound.
And
Right.
when you say nomad, that's like an ad for gnomes.
A vagabond, uh, a gypsy, a although that tends to have religion that goes with it.
Yeah, are you allowed to
A
say gypsy anymore?
I, I wasn't using it offensively. Gypsies are nomadic.
Well, I think maybe you
Um,
should have said a Romanian nomad.
Not all gypsies are Romanian. So who's being offensive now?
Wait, is that truth or not?
Correct. That is
Correct.
true. They're
All right,
not
here
all
y'all keep
Romanian.
going while I Google that.
Um,
Tell me what a nomad is. And explain like I'm five, because let's get real. Our main audience is going to be my 5-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter, and they're not
it's
going to know
true.
what y'all are talking about.
Yeah. Some people would refer to nomads as homeless. We prefer to refer to us as
Home free.
home free.
Home free, I guess.
We choose to have no home, although we are now speaking in terms of our past selves. We used to be nomads. We currently have a home as of 3 weeks ago. Because when you decide to procreate, or when procreation decides to happen to you, you know, it gets a bit hard to have no home. So,
Well, now hold on though. Sorry to interrupt, but if you have a home but you travel all over the world, are you still a digital nomad?
you're not. So at the moment, we are not digital nomads, but we were
Oh, so
digital
even if
nomads
you even have
before.
a home, I would have thought that you could have a home
Well, you can
and
have
still.
a home and be a digital
Guess you could have a
nomad.
home base, but ideally, you should be there less often than you are elsewhere.
Okay,
Yes.
but at this
Uh,
point, you haven't. Have you? I don't think you crossed the threshold of being a non-digital nomads yet.
yeah, I guess in actual reality, we haven't been in our home base for very long. but
There
we
we
have
go.
committed to being here. So
Don't blow up our entire show
not,
format before you have
not
to.
blowing up the format. We're still answering questions about life as digital
We're talking
nomads.
about digital nomad. We're just three people who live in homes, never go anywhere, drinking orange juice,
Making
and having
babies.
babies.
And
Yeah,
having
So
babies,
many
yeah.
babies.
that's just what people want to hear about.
Yep.
Okay, so a digital nomad, you're
Well, that's
traveling.
just the
You're
nomadic part. The digital part means, yeah, I guess like what Michelle said, you you well, physically you're nomadic.
mhm.
Digitally you're not nomadic because you usually work some sort of job or are self-employed or whatever. You have to earn money somehow. So typically we
That
do
could
that
still be nomadic.
online.
If you're like
You
a
could.
freelancer, that's kind of like a nomadic career.
Some people who travel, who I would not qualify as digital nomads, they are just travelers or nomadic.
Hmm.
They make money in other ways. Maybe they busk on the side of the street with their guitar, or
Ah,
they. I met one. I actually have a tattoo from a girl who that's how she earns her money for traveling. She carries tattoo equipment and she tattoos people wherever she goes. And um, yeah, there's all
that's kind
sorts
of
of
cool.
ways that you can make money while you're traveling, but specifically digital nomads tend to work online because it's a slightly more stable form of income. And I say
Yeah, I don't
slightly
know.
because,
I would
as a
say it's
freelancer,
probably equal for the tattooing,
yeah,
but maybe
maybe.
more stable than busking.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I see these buskers around here, and I feel like they probably make more money than I do. I had this one guy, he came up to me. Well, no, I mean, a busker, you're actually like,
Like
you got a
playing your
talent.
guitar or something, like
And a
actually.
panhandler, I guess you're just asking for money.
Right. Panhandlers, I've read in the paper at least, like years ago, that they actually make a pretty decent amount of money.
Yeah. And it seems like
Panhandlers.
they figure out where to be.
And they dodge their taxes because it's all cash.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're like rolling in it.
Look, I don't mind if you ask me for money. Just please pay your taxes.
I'm just going to buy you a fucking sandwich. I'm not giving you my money. I gave a
See, but what if they
guy,
want a beer?
sucks to be him. I gave a guy a
Ah,
leftover pumpkin pie one year after Thanksgiving. She was like, "Here you go, sir."
so I'm so conflicted on this because on the one hand, I
You drinking a
think that
bottle of wine
you're,
there, Willie?
no, I really love these like water bottles that have this little top thing on them.
Mm.
And so to drink more water, I keep this because it's easy. I drink more if I have one of these tops. But then sometimes I put some little drops in it to make it have a different flavor.
Yeah, gotcha.
A little blood orange.
Blood orange drops.
Yeah. But so, I know I don't. I feel as though I should give to those people. I know my dad told me that my grandfather. So like my grandfather grew up poor, and then when he had money, he would like keep cash in his pocket just so that if anybody ever asked him for money, he could give it to him. And he would like perform surgeries on people even if they didn't have money or if they like had to pay him in vegetables or something. And so I feel like I should do that. But then these days, it's like you kind of feel like a sucker because like I had one guy who asked me for money, and then he asked me for a really specific amount, like $2.83, and I'm like, okay,
Bus
I
fare,
mean, I don't
probably.
have that. And I'm like, okay, well, here's $5. Then so I was eating we were eating at a restaurant and then we were going to the movies. Then I'm going to the movies. Same dude asked me for the same weird amount. And I realized, oh, this is just his thing. And he's just going around asking for more money. And then they say some people, I don't know, they could just totally be lying to me. And so I feel like maybe the smartest thing to do would be every time somebody asks me ask me for money, I should make a note and then go donate the money. So it's like,
You know what? Actually, the smarter thing to do is to vote for increases on your taxes that provide services to those who are in need so that homeless people who beg for money don't have to exist
yeah,
because
you
they're
should.
getting welfare.
You ever watch the American news? Yeah,
I don't anymore.
familiar with Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles. There's I just say they're doing a lot of what you said, and they don't seem to be solving the problem.
There's almost no homelessness in the Netherlands. Just
Well, I
throwing it
would
out
say
there.
clearly it has more to do with other things. I would imagine that there's probably not the same issues with drug abuse and stuff like that. But just giving, I don't know.
In a country where marijuana and mushrooms and all of that are perfectly legal,
Mhm.
you think that people don't potentially have issues with drug abuse? I think they probably do. I think the laws just approach it in a very different way.
Well, that would be interesting. I mean, what is the reason then that in our most liberal state, states with the most liberal policies and cities with the most liberal policies, why do they have homeless tent cities and homeless people like, you know, throwing, well, I don't want to I think my father-in-law might still
There's
be
a
here, so I don't
really
want to
huge
say any profanity, but I'll just say, they're throwing human excrement at people's doors and like sleeping in front of buildings and not leaving. I I'm not saying that you're entirely incorrect because I don't know enough to say one way or the other. I just have a feeling there's more to it than that.
My guess would be that the biggest difference is between taxing the people and actually utilizing the taxes in an appropriate way.
Could be.
You can have a lot of liberal policies. That doesn't mean they're actually being followed properly. It doesn't mean there's actually enough funding to solve an issue that's already happening. Um, if they put these policies into play and say like, oh well, if you're on drugs, you're not allowed to be at the shelter. Well, that's an issue that they have to deal with in a different manner, because if you can't be at the shelter and you're addicted to drugs, well then what options are there for somebody who is addicted to drugs? They don't get addicted to drugs overnight. Um,
Mm.
and I don't think a lot of those, and addiction is like a real issue. And you
Well, I
know,
would be. So that's the thing, though. I know you're saying you think that people over in the Netherlands, I'm sure I know they're exposed to the potential, but I don't know that they actually have the same rate of mental illness and the same rate
oh, I know
of
they don't have the
drug
same rate of
abuse.
mental illness for
So
sure,
again,
because
so
mental
again,
health is an option. Mental health care is included in your
sure,
base medical insurance, and the moment something's going to go wrong, like,
yeah, but I
you
don't
have
know. I wonder
support.
if that's it. I wonder if that's it. Just because knowing mentally ill people, one of my best friends, who unfortunately, because of his mental illness, is in jail right now.
Hmm.
Was not going to get help. He wouldn't get help. They got him to go someplace one time, and he left. So I don't know. It's just I think there's a lot of stuff to it, and
Michelle, you know
I
more about the Dutch culture than I
yeah.
do. I
How do
like,
y'all manage?
what do you
Does
think
the
is the
fact
big reason for the lack of, at least I don't see that there's a whole lot of mental health issues compared to in America.
I don't really know what the reason is. I think it's just in general we take better care of our people. We have this insanely high tax bracket, and like everyone's taxed through the roof, of course, like they want to
Except
say.
we're not.
Except we're not, but the money is used in a much better way, I guess. A little bit more optimized to support the people that live here, from when they're young until they die, pretty much. And we don't spend it on, you know, a bunch of stuff that's not really necessary, or whatever else the money goes to. But that's
I'm
the kind of
asking.
stuff that you sort of recognize when you're a digital nomad. You experience
You did it.
other culture. I did it. I pulled us
You
back
brought us
from
back.
I was
Thank you, sir.
laughing.
whatever
I was
whatever
here.
this
I
was
am
going.
asking. I'm asking Chat GPT to answer our question,
How do we pull it
but
back?
here you are. Here you are to bring us back, which is good. We'll talk about this on a
So
future
here's a fun
episode
thing.
about digital nomads dealing with these issues.
Here's a fun thing that you should know. In the digital nomad world, like AI, not just digital nomad, but just in the software and like digital world in and of itself, AI is becoming a much bigger thing. So one of the key things of this podcast is that at least once per episode, Roy will mention something about ChatGPT. And it will always come back, whether it's ChatGPT or DALL-E with images. Um, it's fascinating because it opens up the world of
ChatGPT is kind of
possibilities.
like our mascot.
Yeah, we should see if they can sponsor us, maybe.
They
Um,
should.
they can
Because
write
we
the
have so
script.
much listenership.
They
Yeah,
are They are a for-profit, capped for profit, but they are a for-profit company, so they should have some money to spend
they
on
should.
sponsoring
Anyway,
our
um,
interesting podcast.
what I was saying was that as digital nomad, you sort of experience culture in a different way. So I'm assuming the majority of the people that watch this, Roy's kids are American. So, like, as an American that has lived and worked and traveled abroad, Anne-Marie, like, what big differences do you see that are just not talked about in the United States, I guess, that are very obvious?
What do
Like,
you mean? Sorry.
what is something that happens that is acceptable in a different culture that is just done completely different in the US?
Oh God, regulating food. That
Mm.
happens in most cultures, and it doesn't happen in America. And it would be considered a invasion of our freedoms to put very much regulation on food.
What do you mean regulating food? You mean regulating the people
Like
who
what's
make
allowed
and
in
produce the food?
food,
Hmm.
which part of the reason that's on my mind is because as somebody who cares quite a lot about nutrition and has seen my own mental health change as a result of what I put into my body, I do feel that a lot of potentially mental health issue in America is related to what we put into our bodies. What else? Medicine,
That's you know
pill
what they call that?
popping.
That's the
America
Twinkie defense.
is a pill popping country. You go to the doctor, you have a problem, they give you a pill to take care of it. No one wants to do any work to get better. Um, and
I'll
I'm
say
not,
that is very like preventative medicine, at least in my experience, has been uh, just not as much of a thing.
it's
My
not a
brother
thing in
is
America.
my brother is a
Yeah.
doctor, and he wants, of course, that he does make the effort to do that, but in general, there's not a lot of that. And I know that my dad basically had to like I don't know, it was just very he needed an open heart surgery. It was so hard for him to actually get it,
Hmm.
like to convince them that he needed to get the things done to do it. Of course, that's not really preventative exactly. That's more like it's already happened. But I go to the doctor and I don't feel like I get a lot of like because like I mean I'm overweight and
Hmm.
usually I go in there and it's like okay here's this for your cholesterol,
Hmm.
but I don't have that many doctors who tell me, and it's like, hey, you ought to lose weight. It's usually like, okay, come in, we'll check that cholesterol again and see.
Right.
Of course, now that's fat shaming, right? So
Well,
they
I was
can't tell me
actually about
that.
to say it's almost considered taboo now for a doctor to
Hmm.
tell you that you're fat, because it's fat shaming and it's not accepting rather than being about health. It's no longer about
Yeah.
health, it's about your physical appearance. And if you are what people would call fat and you are physically healthy, no doctor is going to tell you you need to lose weight. But if you are not physically healthy, your doctor should be allowed to tell you that. Like,
Yeah.
they should be allowed to tell you you need to lose weight without risking whatever.
And I think in a lot of cultures, not America, a doctor would be like, well,
You're
you're a
fat,
bit
lose weight.
fat and you need to lose weight.
They
And they would
would.
just say it to your face.
And they would
They
just
would,
say it.
they would just say it. They would state what they think is the cause or what is wrong, and then, give them their approach to a solution
They would
Well,
to
that's
it.
weird though,
they would
because
maybe,
that to
you're a bit
me,
overweight. What is your diet like? What is your lifestyle like? And then they would give you adjustment points.
that actually seems a little bit different. That seems like the opposite of what you would expect, because the what I think of as being like the progressive way of handling it is to say you aren't supposed to hurt anybody's feelings. And I would think that it would be you would think the American doctor, and in fact, I would be surprised if it weren't the case that if I went to a southern type of like concern, like if I went to my doctor or if I went to my brother Hal as a doctor, he is the kind of guy who'd be like, you need to lose some weight. And when I picture like an old school southern doctor, he'd be like, well, you're pretty fat. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
your problem is you're so fat. And I would think that it would be, somebody in California or, France who would be like, oh no, it's fine. You're just a beautiful person. And
Yeah. So I
just
think
maybe the way that you're beautiful is going to kill you.
I think I think the American ideal of progressivism is to uh, be very careful about everything that you say and be very aware not to offend anyone. And I think most of Western Europe's form of progressivism is it is your responsibility whether or not you choose to be offended by something that somebody else says, while also taking into account attempting to accept everyone for who they are. So don't deliberately go around attempting to hurt somebody's feelings, telling them, oh, you're fat, so that makes you, not worthwhile as a person. But if you are a doctor, it's not necessarily the right time to beat around the bush and be super polite about it. And instead, like, yo, dude, it's been 6 months. I've told you a couple times you need to change your diet. You're fat. You got to lose weight. You're going to die. Like, they're much more concerned about not hurting you in the long run than they are about potentially hurting your feelings in the now.
Well, and I should be clear. I don't think that I think over here, I don't think that's the only problem. I think there really is. I don't know if I don't know what the reasoning is, but the lack of focus on preventative care
Mm-hmm.
is like there's more to it than just that. In fact, I think
There's no
most
money in
people would.
preventative care. That's the reason for it.
That's what some people would say. But I'm glad to hear that the whole hurting people's feeling as a crime kind of thing is just in the
Pretty
United
uniquely
States.
American, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's a pretty American thing because even when you're traveling, like you are exposed to a lot of scenarios and events or activities with people from different cultures. And a lot of times when there are Americans in the group, they, the Europeans or whoever else is there will be doing something and they'll make a joke or the local culture will do something. And me as a European, I can watch this and I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But then there can be Americans in the group that are like offended on behalf of
Mm-hmm.
whatever
Of the other people.
is it that they think is offended, like whoever they think is offended, and they get upset. And it's quite enlightening, I guess, as an American traveler to just be hit in the face with like, well, you got to deal with your feelings. I'm not going to, be careful about not trying to offend everyone.
Yeah, it's a very rude awakening, actually, as an American traveler, to go out and suddenly be in this world where people aren't walking on eggshells around you all the time, trying not
Hmm.
to offend you. And I mean, you know me, I'm not a delicate person when it comes to like choosing not to offend people. I'm just going to tell them how it is. But it was really odd to me, actually, when I first started traveling, to know that like other people are that way. And actually, um, and now for the Americans, I feel the need to be very careful about the way I say this, but um, it
Don't get us
actually gave me a
canceled.
different perspective on autism. For high functioning autistic people, um, a lot of times the reason, part of why they're classified as autistic is because of the way they fit into society. They don't fit into society quite as well, um, because they don't pick up on social behaviors, different triggers, body language, things like that. And I used to joke that if you took your average Dutch person and stuck them in America, they'd probably be diagnosed as autistic in America because they would have no fucking clue what's going on. Because the American norm is saying exactly the opposite of what you mean, being friendly and polite first and foremost, and kind of reading between the lines all the time. Whereas the Dutch norm is that very typical, like direct, like, I asked Michelle, would you like to grab coffee sometime? And he says, no, I'm good. Like in America, that would be seen as like, no, you would never say that. You would, oh, absolutely. We'll figure out some time and put it on the schedule. And then you just dodge it and you never do it. But in the Netherlands, it'd be perfectly acceptable to just say, no, I don't want to do that. Just move on.
Okay,
So,
listen, guys. It's time for our sudden death round.
do we have a sudden death
We have
round?
a
I
sudden
didn't
death
know about
Yes,
round.
this.
we have sudden death where I will now ask you questions about our topic of the day. And each of you, so we'll start with Michelle and then Anne-Marie and then Anne-Marie and then Michelle. Go back and forth for each question. And you each have 1 minute to answer the question. Are you ready?
All
No,
right, bring it.
but okay.
Well, no, wait, no, go ahead. What do you need to warm up your vocal cords or something?
I'm just not mentally prepared for this. That's all.
Oh, well, you're going
Go
to do
ahead.
great.
Great.
All right. And the first question: who qualifies as a digital nomad? Take that however you want. Michelle, go.
Before this minute starts, did you get this list from ChatGPT just a minute ago?
No,
Well, you
I
weren't
did
paying
not.
attention to the screen, so I'm pretty sure you.
These are the people who also ask questions
Okay. Well,
from a Google search.
to answer that question, who qualifies to be a digital nomad? I would say anyone that lives a nomadic lifestyle, meaning, well, they might have a home base somewhere, but it's a home base, and they tend to be on the road most of the time, and they work online, or, yeah, I guess online, because you can do computer work that's not online, and I'm not sure if I would say that's a digital nomad per se. You're somehow involved in the online world. That's how you make your living. Typically speaking, those are people from Western countries that earn money in Western countries and spend it in cheap countries, such as Southeast Asian countries or the Central and South American countries. And that's how they make their living. They just
Hmm,
live like
very
kings
nice.
in other countries, really.
And now, Anne Marie, go.
Wait, I'm answering the same question?
You're gonna. You want to answer a different question? You
Oh,
want your own
I
question?
just assumed I
You
would get
don't
my own
think that?
question. Why do
Well,
you
you
need.
can. I didn't know. Maybe I thought you might have something to add.
No, I have
I
nothing to
value
add to
your
that.
intelligence and insight more than you evaluate your own self.
Yeah, no, I have
All right.
nothing
Well,
to
for
add.
this one then, what is the most common digital nomad job? Go. Or it can be multiple jobs.
I would say most frequently digital nomads are consultants or entrepreneurs in some manner. For the ones who work actual like salaried jobs, I would say software engineering is probably the most common.
Not
Or
content creation.
so those would be the people who I would think of as entrepreneurs. So content creation. There's a lot of digital nomads out there who like their whole job is just writing about being a digital nomad or making videos about being a digital nomad. And sadly, not everyone can just make a living off of touting about their lifestyle. Some of us have to do
Okay.
something else.
Now for this one, Anne Marie's going to go first, but you both have to answer this one. The question is, tell us an example of, let's say, the most somehow interesting digital nomad that you've ever met. Anne Marie, have you been thinking about it while I've been talking about it? Do you have one in mind? Are you ready to roll?
No.
Go.
The most interesting digital nomad who I've ever met.
Yeah, like the most interesting man in the world, but he's a digital nomad, and he might be a woman.
At least I'm not the only of the Americans who's going to be hated by, in the comment stream. I'm completely blanking at this moment. I think
My
actually,
gosh, you've met so many of them.
so I
You're going to marry one of them.
think, yeah, but like I can't use Michelle because like
Sure, that'd be a good way for us to get to know more about him.
no, I can't use Michelle. We're gonna get to know him in other ways.
Well, you got 12 seconds left.
I think our Irish friend Rory, I think, is the most interesting digital nomad I've ever met. He's a support engineer and he's Irish. I don't know if you've ever met an Irish person, but they are.
I know they say, what's the crack?
He says a lot of what's the crack, and he is a very unique, highly energetic individual. He's like a golden retriever of people. He loves life and has a constant energy all the time, but he's also super fascinating to talk to and like infectiously energetic. Like he could talk to you about the most boring thing, but you would suddenly care about it because he just has so much energy in the way he talks about it.
Sounds like a potential future guest.
I've told him to his face that he's a golden retriever, by the way, and he liked that. So it's not an insult. Like
That's not
he
ever, nobody would
knows
think that that was an
he
insult.
knows that it's okay that I'm comparing him to a dog.
I would say that being compared to a golden retriever is more often used as a compliment than an insult.
Okay, fair. I didn't know it was used very
Um,
often.
well, but I can understand you're American, so you're worried about hurting people's feelings.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right, and Michelle, go.
Yeah, I don't really know if I have met. I don't really know anyone that sort of stands out as an interesting digital nomad.
What about me?
Well, interesting can mean anything. Interesting can mean interesting enough for them to come to mind when you hear the word interesting digital nomad.
I don't know if he
Maybe
was a
they
digital
fold the end of the
nomad.
toilet paper when they put it on the roll, like in that weird little triangle.
Hmm,
That could be interesting.
that could be interesting. No,
So you had somebody who, what were you going to say?
well, I don't know if he was a digital nomad. I was very new to traveling, solo traveling at that time, and I was in Bali, and there was this guy named Rambo, like the movies, and
That's what I
he,
call Roy 5.
oh yeah, but he was kind of like yes man. He would just say yes to everything. Like you'd be in a conversation with him, and he would overhear something, from the group next to you, and he would just, suddenly join that conversation and just join in, and then the next day they would go on a huge adventure to do whatever it was, and then, you'd see him later hanging out with completely different people, doing something completely different, and I don't know, he just dragged everyone around, and I guess he was a center of attention at this hostel, but yeah. But again, I don't know if he was digital nomad or if he was just on holiday having fun.
Let's say he was a digital nomad.
Let's
Say he
pretend he
was.
was, just for
Let's
the
say he
sake of
was.
the
Now,
podcast.
final question. What are the main downsides of being a digital nomad? And each of you will have this question. So maybe try to stick to one or two and leave some for Anne Marie and Michelle. Go.
Personally, I found that starting a business is a lot harder when you're on the road and you're moving all the time. Like, you have that routine that you want to build up with that, and everything else that comes along with starting something new. The second one, and that's something that's maybe a bit more about me and Anne Marie, is we like to
What's my
visit.
name?
Anne-Marie.
You better get
And
that right before the wedding.
yeah. And that is, we like to visit IKEA in every country that we go to, and we always get really inspired by all the things that we see. Like, we walk around and like, oh, if we ever get a house, we do this. If we ever have a garden, we can do this and this. IKEA doesn't have a lot of garden and stuff, but you get the point. And you can't do that as a digital nomad. You can get fancy Airbnbs and hotels, but you can't really make your own place.
Man, you'd be their favorite guest. They're like, yeah, these people, they came over, I guess they loved the place because they went out to IKEA and like we got home, they like bought all new furniture, they painted it, they put a fire pit in the backyard. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Love these
we've
people.
been known to go to IKEA and buy a couple things here and there to add to our spaces.
I
Actually,
just wanted to put it together.
uh,
It's like Lego for adults. Okay, Anne Marie, a
I
little,
would.
actually, you know what, let's make it a little, so also problems, but then also, if you need another angle, just downsides in general of being a digital nomad. Problems, downsides.
I thought the
Go.
question was downsides, but cool. Um, yeah, I think the big one for me is just routine and friendships. Like, you can make friends quite quickly, and quite deep friendships actually quite quickly, when you loop up with other travelers, because travelers know that you only have so much time together, so you kind of have to go pretty deep pretty quickly. However, oftentimes those friendships don't last once you've separated from one another. So depending on how attached you get to somebody, that can be heartbreaking. Eventually you learn to stop being attached, but then you find that you don't actually have very many friends. Because it's hard to have friends if you're not all in one place, you know. Our session ends in 5 minutes, so you're aware. So yeah. So now that we're like settling a bit, friendship is hard in a different way, because these people who we meet aren't travelers. So they're not used to going super deep, super quickly. They already have friends. They don't necessarily need new friends in their circle. So it takes a lot longer to get a friend circle. So you become quite reliant on either your faraway friends or just on yourself. Or you learn that like you have to fill your social needs with strangers. Yeah. So that's probably the hardest for me, is the friendship thing.
Well, since we only have 5 minutes left, it's time for scenes from the next episode of Diff'rent Folks. And
How
for
can we
this,
do that when we're doing
I
Zoom?
will run credits. Right now, I don't have any, but in the future, I'll have some credits. And then you guys are going to recreate as though you went into the future and then came back here. So these things now had happened in the past. Parts of our next episode, in which we'll be discussing how do you become a digital nomad.
Well, blah 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 blah.
Well, that's good. Okay,
Very
and then
deep.
make it, and
Very
then
deep.
you got to cut yourself off too because it's got to be. Well, the way you become a digital nomad, I'll tell you, it's easy. You do it in one step, and then you switch and you go to the next one. We'll work on this. We'll either never do this again or perfect it to where it's amazing. But that was good. I liked the sudden death answers. I thought that was really interesting.
I think that's a good addition to it. Anne-Marie, do you want to close us off with some final words?
That was all. That is our
No,
podcast.
do a final thought.
Final thought.
So Michelle will do the intro. I'll do the questions. Then we'll do all the blah blah blah. Then we'll do the sudden death, and then you'll do Anne Marie's final thought, like Jerry Springer.
Anne Marie's final thought is: please don't hate us. We don't mean to be offensive. We're hoping to be funny. But I am going to rag on Americans a lot because I just, I left for a reason. Roy's going to defend
And I'm
Americans a
going to
lot
disagree with her. I'm not always going to defend it because I just feel like
because you also don't like the
people.
Californians.
She has good points.
Right. I assume that you're talking about California. And that all the problems would be solved if people would just let me run the country, which they won't. And
Not
that's
entirely.
fine.
It's not. The conservatives and the liberals are equally bad in my mind these days.
Yeah, but if it were up to me, everybody would be in their own state, running their own stuff the way they wanted to do it. It would be like everybody would be kind of like their own little Netherlands. We'd have little. It's like, oh, you want to do things this way? You'd pick a way to go, and you'd figure it out. Trust me, I may one day get the chance to do it, and you'll be so happy.
I think that the U.S. should function more like the way the EU does, and every state should be its own country. I think it'd be a better
way. Have it.
To be honest.
You heard it here, folks.
That's my final thought, I guess. U.S. turn into 52 separate countries. There you go.
Good job, guys. Y'all are as good as my basketball players.
That is not a compliment.
I'm so proud to be. No, they're
your
really
basketball
good.
players are 5.
Yeah, but for 5 and 6-year-olds with a coach who's doesn't know anything about anything, they're amazing.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, we'll see you next week on Diff'rent Folks.
Diff'rent Folks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.